Hey, this is Kevin with Pacific House of Mission, going through our next study in our Voice of Paul series. We're covering portions of chapters 15, 16, and 17 of the book of Acts. We're also introducing the book of 2 Thessalonians. And so that's another cool part of this series, is that now we've come to that timeline in Acts where Paul is writing another New Testament book of the Bible. We're going to see, kind of what the context is. And so just a real quick picture of the three different, major missionary journeys of Paul, how you can remember them in a very simple manner. Paul's very first missionary journey was all about Galatia, southern Turkey, going through there, planting churches, sharing the gospel. It's about Galatia. Second missionary journey, which we're on right now, it's pretty much all about Macedonia. And Macedonia includes some churches that a lot of us have heard because some of the books of the Bible are named after them. There's Philippi, there's Berea for the Bereans, there's Thessalonica, there's Corinth, and this is where he really hits for the first time in his second missionary journey. When we hit the third missionary journey, we're going to see that it's mostly all about the city of Ephesus. And it's more complex than that because really Ephesus is a base of operations in which he dispatches, ministry to all areas. But first missionary journey, Galatia. Second missionary journey, Macedonia. Third missionary journey, city of Ephesus, and a power ministry breaking out from there. Okay. So another important backstory point for the second missionary journey in this study are four main guys that you're going to hear in different places in the New Testament. So I thought I'd highlight them. One, of course, is Paul, and he starts the journey off with a guy named Silas. Paul and Silas, you remember them? They're going to be in the Philippian jail, and they're going to be worshiping God, and then they're going to be broken out of prison, and it's a really cool story. But Silas joined Paul starting earlier in Jerusalem when he went down to the Jerusalem Council. Well, now he's Paul's right-hand man, and he's a well-known prophet as well. So they're passing through Galatia, right, to get to Macedonia. They don't get very far. They get to a city called Lystra. And it's there that the people of not just Lystra, but the surrounding towns, they say, Paul, on your previous journey, there was this guy who came to know Christ, and he is something else. There's some serious potential in him. And they introduce him to Timothy, right? Well, let's bring him on. So he joins this band of men. And so now there's three of them. And then they're just about to cross the sea to go into Macedonia. And they're at a city called Troas. And that's where they pick up this fourth guy. And this guy's name is Luke. And Luke is the one who is writing this book in the first place, the book of Acts. And so all up until this time, Luke is writing the stories of what had happened, but he's writing it in the third person. They went here, then they did this, then those guys went, and words like that. But this is where he starts to say, and then we went, and this is what happened to us. So he's talking in the first person plural. And you can kind of follow throughout the book of Acts after this point, when Luke gets picked up and dropped off to shore up some business in different places, because the us and the we passages start and stop at different points. We're going to see that he gets dropped off at Philippi to shore up the strengthening of the churches that Paul planted there. So that's kind of a cool little thing that you might miss when you're just reading it, but it's cool to see that whole backstory developing. But as he's going through Macedonia, Paul is variously at different times, he is dropping off Luke, he's dropping off Timothy, he's dropping off Silas, and as well as other folks. Usually when he has to, get driven out of town for some reason, other people are allowed to stay behind, and he purposefully leaves them behind, and sometimes even sends them back. And that's because Paul is going, he's preaching the gospel, but he's got a whole system. He's also building churches and church houses. He's also having elders and leaders appointed so that they can own the churches operations for themselves. And then he's got some sort of a set a series of teachings and traditions that all these cities and new churches get to be taught in. And the purpose of all those is that people would not just have faith in Christ, but they would know how to live it out in a daily walk and in a weekly walk and in a seasonal walk. Okay, so he gets driven out eventually, and he ends up out of Thessalonica, and he ends up in Berea. And Timothy is still back in Thessalonica. Paul and Silas are in Berea. And Paul does not know what the condition of the Thessalonian churches are that he just planted there. He does know that those agitators that were always 2 days behind him, opposing his message, that they showed up in Thessalonica, agitating them with, false messages. And so he's in Berea. He's wondering, how are the Thessalonians doing? And it's while he's still in Berea that Timothy comes from Thessalonica. He catches up after strengthening those churches and finishing their teaching and training series. And he's got great news. And he says, Paul, the churches in Thessalonica are some of the strongest churches that have taken, that we've ever heard of. And Paul is elated because he knows they're going through trials. But this is where he sits down and he writes 2 Thessalonians. Know what you're thinking? Doesn't he write 1 Thessalonians first? No, read it like this, that he first writes 2 Thessalonians. In fact, if you put it in that order and add the context to it, then the order of and the teachings and the message of 2 Thessalonians and then 1 Thessalonians will make a lot more sense to you. It won't seem as extreme. It'll seem like he's trying to calm people down and have them live regular Christian lives, okay? So he starts to pen 2 Thessalonians to this church. And so in this study, we're just going through the first 10 verses. And it's Paul saying, I know that you got some trouble there. God will give it back to them. But you guys have become the exemplar churches in all of Macedonia, as well as the churches we planted before that, and even down, into Judea. And so that's an indication that these guys aren't just going from place to place without communications. There's all sorts of letters being written. There's all sorts of messaging and couriers and news that's traveling throughout the Christian communities in this Eastern Mediterranean world. That other churches are already hearing about how well the Macedonians are being faithful to Christ, okay? So hopefully that gives some good context for you to go into your reading yourself, and also provide some good dialectic conversation with the folks that you are in study with. Hope you enjoy it. Peace out.